Well, a campaigner of the Occupy Lekki Tollgate planned protest says the demonstration set for Saturday is legitimate. Wale Olubanji says a demonstration will take place against the official reopening of the site. Campaigners said the toll gate is a symbol of death, but it must be turned into a symbol of victory and justice. There are reports of counter-protests being organized, and Olubanji says the organizers only want to defend personal interest and the interest of the owners of the Lekki toll gate. And joining us for more on this story is lawyer Dele Farotimi. Glad to have you join us.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Good, fantastic. The question is, what really is your motivation for this protest? Do you think you're being sensitive and wise to engage in this at this particular point in time, and considering what has transpired in the past?
I believe there is little facts. I became aware of the planned protest day before yesterday. Found it online just like any other Nigerian. But in the immediate aftermath of the NSAS protest, after the brutal murders that took place on the 20th, some of us became inadvertently involved because care had to be taken of the injured. We had to provide assistance to most of the victims. So I have a channel of communication, and I speak with the young people, especially the ones from the Lekki Tollgate. So when it was brought to my attention day before yesterday, that in reaction to the news of the reopening of the tollgate, there was a planned protest for Saturday. My original reaction was, why now? And I was having these discussions with the organizers, and then I saw the different reactions online. They no bond them, Papa well, defend Lagos. So again, when you weigh these two, the first thing I asked myself was, however much I might disagree with the exercise of a right, it is incumbent on me, once I recognize that it is the person's right, to defend their right to exercise that right. It is a democratic right. In a democracy, even though we are not one, we pretend to be one, that people should be able to express their disagreement as long as it is done peacefully. But to now have reactions where people are being threatened for daring to express a desire to protest, it is repugnant in the extreme, and it is fascist. This is still a democracy. The only thing anyone might want to speak about is, please let the government ensure that it does not degenerate into violence, because it is always the government that introduces the violence. But as a right, let's think about that as a principle first. Does the citizen have a right to protest peacefully? Nobody can dispute that.
Okay, yes, Dele, I want to ask at this point, because the premise of the law is that one right ends where another right begins. Yeah. You may not have time to answer this in full, but I'll just throw down the question to get us going. And I just want to maybe just qualify. The government, it's not proven that the government always introduces the violence. But moving on, some people may have rightly been concerned that protests at the toll gate may impinge on free movement, especially if we're looking at the visuals. They stand and block the passage of cars going through that place, which is a valid concern. Would you not agree to that?
Oh, yes, it is. I agree completely. Those are valid concerns. And my own take on it really is that if citizens have expressed the desire to protest, and the government and other citizens have these concerns about the free movement of vehicles and people through that same place, I would imagine that the proper thing to do at that point might be engage with the protesters, perhaps ask them to confine themselves to a part. As of today, it is not the entirety of the toll gate that have been reopened. Up till today, is only a section of it. If they've said they want to come and protest on Saturday, surely, in a democracy, there should be sufficient room for the accommodation of legitimate grievances, you need not agree with the exercise of that right.
All right, we'll get back to you in a bit. Just keeping you on pause. We'll be back. All right, we still have Farotimi, yes, if I'm correct. Yes, yeah, Dele, I got it. Dele Farotimi is still here with us. Yes, we're just discussing behind the scene, and beautiful, well and good. I was just wondering, it's a pity we don't have the other side. I read an article where they were saying these hoodlums, and I felt, why should you call somebody who is protesting a hoodlum? But then again, Dele, have you considered, or the people doing this, have they considered the fallout? I mean, these two protests are going to happen on the same day. Isn't that a recipe for anarchy and mayhem at the same place, the same event, two opposing sides?
Look, at the end of the day, we either have a government or we don't have one. We either have a democracy or we don't have one. If a people have come out and said, look, we are aggrieved, there are clear indications that the Nigerian army, which is meant to be a principal party at the tribunal, has decided that it has no respect for the tribunal. And then the LCC considered a principal accused, a principal participant in what has been variously described as a massacre, and has not finished giving account of his part, has now been rewarded with an order asking it to go back to its operations. It is conceivable that people will be aggrieved. Now, they are aggrieved and they've said, we're going to protest. And the history of that protest has always been peaceful. And then, as with every fascist regime, you immediately have a voice speaking up against the exercise of a right and speaking the language of the government. Let me give you an analogy. I went to a particular European embassy at Lekki, Water Carrington, and there is a particular gentleman, a Nigerian. He's the security personnel manning their processes there. He is one of the rudest human beings you're ever going to come across. He will speak to you the way the Europeans will not speak to you. The same words that the economic and political interests would want to speak but could not speak because of political correctness and decorum are the words that these counter-protesters are speaking. Nobody has said no. They have every right to protest, but must it be violent? Nobody who has protested under the umbrella of the NSAS movement, I've never seen any one of them holding any weapon. The people who do the counter-protest, we've seen them before the Lekki shooting. In this same Lagos, we saw state bosses ferrying the likes of Adagun, the one who was chasing people around in Alausa.
Now, Dele, are you being fair? No, hold on. Yeah. Dele, are you being fair because you do not know the people who are going to protest now? So if you're tagging them already, there seems to be a problem.
We've heard their language.
Their language is bad enough.
Please. Let's be fair to ourselves. We've heard the language. The language is exceedingly violent. They no born them papa. Let's be clear. When somebody comes and says that because I have elected to exercise a constitutional right, as useless and imperfect as our constitution is, it still allows me the right to protest. At least it says so. I have said so in relation to this NSAS thing. Nigeria would have to decide whether it is a democracy or a fascist state. In a democracy, people have the right to protest.
Okay.
If the state cannot provide security for the protesters, we know who to point at the end of the day. We might have difficulties with establishing culpability in relation to the 28th, but this time around, we know who to face.
All right, Mr. Dele, let me come in here and ask you two questions. First, the split decision by the judicial panel giving the LCC a go-ahead to repossess the toll plaza was based on an interim report by the forensic audit team. As a lawyer, do you think this is hasty, as described as some of those members of the panel? And how long, really, should the panel be in charge, or should the toll plaza be under the control of the judicial panel? And secondly, you talked about, pointing fingers and the responsibility of government, as well as the rights of the people to protest. So what would be the best approach for the Lagos State government at the moment to allay fears of further violence and threats to life?
Thank you. I'll take the first question as it relates to the action or the decision of the judicial panel and the 5-4 split decision. Here is the thing. The protesters never really had much faith in that panel. I belong to an organization known as Ramimba. That was the radical agenda movement in the Nigerian bar. We took it upon ourselves to persuade the protesters, the victims, that they should take the legal route and go to the panel. It was our belief up till now that as long as the panel works and everybody submits themselves to the panel's jurisdiction, then there will be justice for all. But what we have found is that whilst we have submitted ourselves to the panel has been used more as an instrument to buy time, one, and now it has become a way of legitimizing the reward of a principal accused in multiple murders. So there is a lot of discontent about the way the panel has carried out its operation and carried on. But I'm a lawyer. If I'm displeased with a judicial decision, as imperfect as I believe, in fact, our system is useless, if the truth be told. But to a very large extent, there are still upstanding men and women. And what we have elected to do is to proceed to seek an order of certiorari in relation to the panel's decision. That is us pursuing the legal option as lawyers. Now, to take the second question as it relates to what to advise the government, let me do us both a favor. Every time there has been an attempt by residents of Lekki, and let's be clear, the people calling these protests, they've gone a little quicker than some of us, but the decision has already been taken at several levels that we will test the law and we will test the capacity of the state when it comes to reopening that toll gate. Because at the end of the day, people died. Whether it was one, whether it was two, we have a duty to establish that. At the end of the day, the Nigerian army acted in that place, and it has refused to submit to the jurisdiction of the same panel that is now ordering that toll gate be reopened. So at the end of the day, what justice has been given to the victims, whether the dead or the injured or those who are merely traumatized emotionally by their presence there, what has been done for them?
Okay, so let me come in on that question. Let me seem to be answering it. With reference to the ruling by the Supreme Court or the Federal High Court in Abuja that the CBN unfreeze the accounts of the NSAS protesters, would that not seem to be at least a step in the right direction?
See, if an act was never meant to have been done in the first place, and it was done, when it is undone, yeah, we acknowledge the fact that a wrong deed has been undone, but it does not change the fact that it was never meant to have been done in the first place. It is dirty to the hearing that in a democracy, patently fascist tactics are constantly employed by the state in seeking to put down the grievances of the people. I was trying to make a point, and it is important that this point be made. Every time there has been an attempt at protesting at Lekki Tollgate, there has always been organized resistance by the state, combining the use of thugs and the Nigerian police to break those protests. The first time that it came to national attention was merely the 20th of October because the army was involved this time around. This one, that a protest has again been called for Saturday and there are threats of violence, note that the threats of violence have come exclusively from those who are organizing the counter-protest. I say without equivocation, The counter-protest has all the fingerprints of the Lagos state government, and we believe that if anything should happen to a single person in that place, we know who to face. Babajide Sanwo-Olu will be the principal accused person.
We have to caution you there.
I'm just making my point clear.
No,
because
you're making your point, but that is, of course, an allegation. I mean,
no.
Hold on, Dele, hold on. Lagos state government is not here. You cannot begin to say that it has the imprint. No. But you're saying it has the print.
I'm sorry?
You said he has the imprint of the Lagos state.
Yes, because the gentleman who spoke for the Occupy Lagos crowd yesterday, we have conclusively identified him as an APC apparatchik.
That does not still mean that it has the imprint of... But anyway, that's by the way, just to clarify that.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that, because they're not here to defend themselves, and we can't just be accusing them any whichever way. Okay, again, the LCC, talking about the LCC. LCC is a business venture organization. Some people are employed there. Some people work there. And then this was a 5-4 decision. And so don't the protesters, also including you, realize the fact that these people have been out of job all this while and are not earning. And therefore, maybe the LCC should be reopened while the investigations are still on, because the panel is still working.
You see, I do not presume to prejudge what the panel has decided. Like I told you, we have taken a decision. We're appealing the decision of the panel. The point I am making in relation to the protest are simple. The protesters know as a fact, because some of them were there, and I have talked to several protesters. When you say LCC has staff and it's a business, we are aware that it is a business. But we also know that that business does not exist for the interests of the people. That is an issue we can debate. Like you said, they are not here. It's not personal. And I would like to make a point so that we are clear. I have not said that the decision of the panel should be discountenanced. We have appealed it. The people who have called for a protest, hear them clearly as well. They have not said that they are fighting against the decision of the panel. They are saying that they are dissatisfied. And within their right as citizens, they are protesting that decision. That is still a constitutional right. We should not need to be pre-qualifying before we might exercise a right. Is it that now the person who has elected to exercise that right also has a duty under the law to work within the law? Those who say they are counter-protesting also have a duty to work within the law. The state government has a duty to protect all. So when there is a breakdown, it is still the state government and the law enforcement agencies that must explain the reason why that breakdown took place. You cannot blame any violence on a man who has not communicated a desire or shown any intention or ever employed violence in his protest. The NSAS protest lasted quite a few days, over almost 2 weeks. Not one recorded incidence of violence initiated by an NSAS protester. This is not by accident, it's a deliberate choice. If violence is not brought into the space, the state cannot legitimize its own use of violence. So the NSAS protesters have no intention of being violent, 1. 2, it is within the right of the state to engage the people who have planned the protest or engage the protesters themselves. When they have not brought violence, there is no need to inflict violence on them. But this is not the story of the Lekki Tollgate. It has always been that when you show any inclination to protest against that toll gate, you are visited with violence.
All right, Dele Farotimi, thank you so much for being on News Today.